Hey guys, welcome to the Wholesale Hustler live broadcast. It's sponsored by the Partner Driven Real Estate Investing Program. Every week we bring on incredible people all over the United States that are absolutely killing it in the real estate industry. Today we have Cheryl Johnson. Cheryl and I have quite a bit of history. We go back probably about 12 years, Cheryl, 10 years?
We're actually about 14.
Okay, we go about 14 years back. We'll go over our background here in a minute, but Cheryl and I used to work together. Then she became her own realtor. And a broker. She's absolutely killing it in her marketplace of St. Louis. And we'll hit on that also. She was a top 5 producer in her metro area. Anyway, it's interesting. Whenever we have guests on here, I usually show up at the last minute and they tell me who's on. And 9 out of 10 times I never even ask the questions. I just kind of go along with it. Cheryl's the only guest I've ever requested to be on here because, all kidding aside, she is a fabulous agent. She absolutely killed it for me also. So she is and the thing I like about Cheryl is she stood the test of time. You know, in the years that we worked together, there was a lot of people that were just gone. I mean, that was the market crashed in 2008. That did a total wipeout. She weathered the storm. She's doing great now. So welcome aboard, Cheryl.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to hit, you offer 2 things that our guests can benefit from tremendously. Obviously, the realtor side. We're going to talk about that in a minute. But the other thing you offer, because our guests are so investor focused across the United States, you offer that perspective, meaning that you worked in this industry before you even got licensed. And like you said, about 14 years ago, you worked for me. You were, didn't I tell you yesterday? She was like the top sales girl that I ever had.
I'll tell you, the funny thing is I've actually never met Cheryl. So I'm so glad to actually finally meet you over the camera. But, I started working with Peter about 5-6 years ago now. And he's always brought, you up and the great job that you did. And everything that you guys did together, he's like, she's literally the best salesperson I've ever seen. I mean, and that's a compliment coming from Peter because he doesn't say that about many people.
Yeah, no, Cheryl, you did a great job. But that's kind of where I want to start out with today, because a lot of people that listen to this, our podcast, are not licensed. They're maybe wholesaling. Some of them are maybe selling their own properties without utilizing realtors. Some of them work for people like myself who are, large investors and use non-licensed people to sell properties. So going back to, 14 years ago, from what you remember, can you just kind of talk about it? If you're, let's say, an investor, maybe you're selling your own properties, you're not licensed. What are some things that you remember that really made you excel in this industry? I mean, because you absolutely freaking killed it with me. I remember one time going up to my partner, Jeff, couple times, and I said, Jeff, dude, we can't keep up with how fast she's selling them. So kind of going back to those non-licensed days, what kind of advice can you give to some non-licensed people about how to move investor-grade inventory?
I think the biggest thing, and whether you're in the retail market or investor market, you have to know who your buyer is. Who's your target audience? Now, that could be when you're talking to a seller to try to get them to sell to you. It could be when you're talking to an investor, a lender, or an end buyer. You have to know what each of the motivations of those people are. Are they looking for profit? Are they looking to dump the property? Are they looking for convenience? Are they looking for spread? Are they looking to buy and hold? Are they looking to flip? There's so many aspects of the business that you have to know, but at that one time, at that one moment when you're talking to that person, you have to put yourself in their shoes and say, what do you want? How do I get you what you want in the way that maximizes your profit and does it in the least amount of time? And if that's your goal, with every single person you're dealing with along the chain, you will be successful. If you lose sight of that, if you lose sight that you are there to complete a deal for someone, I think that when the business in its totality gets away from you.
Back then and to this day, Cheryl, when we use probably 3 non-licensed people here. We have 3 non-licensed agents here, not agents, but salespeople that sell our inventory. And and one of the things that we're always, and this because all the inventory goes to other investors, So there's this whole debate in this industry. How do you find your investors? I mean, I'm a non-licensed person. I want to sell my own properties. I don't want to necessarily utilize an agent. Talk a little bit about how you used to connect with investors, both locally here in Georgia, regionally, even national investors. What were some tools? What were some resources you used to connect with those agents?
A lot of word of mouth. I think a lot of times just being available, talking about things, fielding questions, being, holding confidentiality when someone says something to you, being the source of expertise that can lead to follow through really puts you in a position where people will come to you as someone to get advice from. Then that leads to other people because you never know what's going to happen. Someone at some point in their life is going to have to be in a real estate transaction. So we're talking a basic human need that you're filling. So if you're open to it, if you're available, if it's your business, if you can hold a great reputation, hold the people that you are around in high regard and they the same as you, I think that has been the biggest tool for me and probably the secret to my longevity in this business.
What's your opinion, the difference between selling over a phone as opposed to selling face-to-face? I mean, if there's an ability to connect with a seller, with a buyer face-to-face, are you going to take advantage of that? Or are you more like, okay, talk about that, how important it is to connect with people?
A human-to-human connection is so important to me. If I can get in front of someone, I want to be in front of them. I don't shy away from meetings. I don't shy away from even voice. Texting is so prevalent right now, and I do it completely all the time. But if I can do it by voice, awesome. If I can do it even quicker by having that meeting and that face-to-face to say that I'm a real person and I have that connection with someone, I think it's really important if you can get it. Now, a lot of times people's lives don't get it, and sometimes people shy away from that. And if that's, I adjust myself to that person and say, what does that person want and what do they need? But if I can get the face-to-face with someone, it's just priceless.
So now go back to the 14 years ago when we worked together and you were selling investor grade inventory. From what I remember, and correct me if I'm wrong, as important as that client was to sell to, did you even look at the inventory back then? What's your opinion if you're selling kind of investment properties, you're wholesaling deals, you're flipping them quickly? How much did you really analyze the deals themselves? Did you go look at them? Did you walk them? Did you analyze them? Or did you kind of conceptually present the deal to the investors?
It totally depended on the deal and how. When I first started, and keep in mind, I had moved from, I think at that point, I moved from Colorado to Atlanta. And I remember sitting in your interview, you're like, what's your biggest downfall of why I shouldn't hire you? And I said, to be honest with you, I don't know the area. And you're like, we can solve that. And I'm like, yeah, I have a GPS. I'm going to be good. And that's kind of how we did it. So in the beginning, I really had to, when I was first starting, I really had to analyze every single thing. And then as it just went back, I could do drive-bys and analyze things in a quicker method. But when I was first starting, it was really important for me to know the area, how to get around, what was close, what building, what the seller or buyer or seller was up against. That was really important. As I became more proficient and I kind of knew the neighborhoods, I knew the houses, I would do a quick in and out. It became, the time investment was much heavier on the front end when I was learning the business and learning the area.
So I'm going to kind of deviate here for a second because Cheryl said something that I talk about Julie all the time. And for those of you that know me, you guys know Julie. Julie runs everything for me. I mean, I try to take the limelight. I like to tell everybody I do it all, but really behind the scenes, she's the one coordinating everything out of this gigantic building we're in. But there's one thing I always talk about Julie that, like Cheryl just mentioned, and that's exactly right. She was the last person to do that with me with. And people all the time always say, well, Peter, how do you build a team? How do you build a team? How do you build an infrastructure? And I use you an example. I need to start using an example because this is, again, totally a sideline thing, but I think very, very informative for those of you that are building teams out and hiring. So when Cheryl interviewed with me 14 years ago, the interview went exactly like that. And then she did exactly what Julie did that night. When Julie interviewed with me initially, she literally went back, and I still remember, but she freaking started blowing up my phone. And so when people are asking me, well, how do you interview? I mean, I always tell people can fake you out. People can present the best resumes. People give you the best credentials. But ultimately, I put a tremendous amount of value on finding people that want to be here. Right. I mean, there's my world. There's so much to be said about somebody that wants to be in my world. So Cheryl, that's right. She just reminded me. So the night she interviewed me, because back then the technology wasn't the way it is now. I remember I was at my house. I pick up my phone, like my house phone, not my cell phone, but my house number. I'm just like, hello. And there was Cheryl. She's like, dude, am I hired? And I mean, like, she aggressively went after getting hired. And again, kind of a side note, so important. You know, it's a question, again, that I get raised all the time. Who do you bring on? You bring on one of the key aspects of bringing people on is somebody that goes over the top, showing you how bad they want to be there. So anyway, kind of a sideline thing. The other thing I want to talk to you about, still sticking in that non-licensed end, obviously one property, one buyer. You know, one buyer can buy multiple properties, but in real estate transactions, that's usually how it works. Right. But at the same time, there's a lot of buyers in your world. Let's say when you're selling, wholesaling deals, how important is it to stay in touch with the buyers that aren't necessarily didn't buy your last 2 or 3 deals? I mean, are they kind of gone by the wayside? Are they not? And what do you utilize back then, and what do you utilize now to stay in touch with people?
Well, you can do a lot of things that are a little bit more hands off, like newspaper, newsletters, and constant contact through emails. You can do CRM. You know, you can do a lot of things that stay in contact. But to be honest with you, sometimes I just go through a list and I just text my clients. I say, hey, what's going on? And I make that person, even if it's like, how's your baby? How's your kids? And let them know that they were important in the transaction. You know, even if they're clients, actually just yesterday, I got a before and after picture of what he's doing to the house. And that stuff that I still have that connection with him, even after the deal is closed. I'm out of the transaction now because he's the end buyer and the end user. He still sends it to me, and I want to hear it. I want to see that he's being successful. I want to know that when I go into a house, if I'm dealing with the investor, because I have so much experience on both on the retail side and on what the usability of this property is and what the expectations are for maximizing the value, I'll go in and make suggestions like change this, do this, leave this alone, and kind of work around that way. To the fact to see that people are actually doing it and they're happy and proud of the results. You know, you really have to tap into that because they're trusting you for a reason. And then you kind of have to maintain that level of like, this is why you're trusting me. And this is real. Like, I really do care about what I do. And I mean, I think like you said, there's so many people who can fake it in this business, but they cannot fake it for very long. And you have to be interested in people. You have to want to see people succeed, and you have to want to be a part of that success.
And you know what I think, Cheryl, and one thing it comes back to is building relationships with individuals. And just from the little bit of time that I've spent with you here, I've noticed that's probably your strong suit. You know, you're still, you know, have a relationship, you know, people from 14 years ago. You're constantly building relationships with investors and things like that. You know, one thing I want to, and there's, you know, difference of opinions here, but there's men and women in this business, you know, and I feel like as being a woman, I kind of have the upper hand. Would you agree with that?
I'd like to think so. You know, I mean, yes and no, to be honest with you, we see it all, you know, but I will say that there, of the people that are in my industry, if you look at the list of the top 25 producers that are in St. Louis, there's like 2 men.
Wow.
Yeah, that's absolutely incredible. And you know, I want to give advice for people out there that are investors and they're new to investing. And I want to do it from the standpoint of you being, you know, a real estate agent. Right. If I'm an investor new in the business and I am looking to start working with a realtor in my area, what are some of the things that I should look for so that I'm able to find someone like you, Cheryl? If I was able, you know, to go to St. Louis and buy, fix, and sell a property, how would I go about finding somebody like you?
Well, I would say this. I mean, a lot of times when you go strictly into investments, it is very difficult to get a real estate broker to work with you because a lot of times when you're doing the transactions, they're onesie twosies, they're very small deals, they're fleeting, meaning they're really quick, and then they kind of go away. So I think one, you have to establish that relationship, and you have to have a long-term plan, both between the broker with good for you and good for the broker. So you have to go and say, this is our plan for X. And then when I fix it up and sell it, I'm going to use you to do it. So that way you can build that relationship. Because if you're just doing, one $50,000 house, the commission's like $500, you get to split with your broker. It's really not worth your time. And I think that's what a lot of investors come up with who are doing kind of like the lower end rentals, basically 200, maybe 150 and under. I think that's their chief complaint with dealing with brokers, is that there's just not enough commission in it to hang that broker on. So you have to have a long-term plan for that. Also, you have to have someone who knows the area. And there's many, and that can advise you correctly, like, what is the real ARV here? What's the real after repair value? And then guide me somewhat on how I should buy, what's my formula, what should I stick by? And then someone who can also temper you. Because I think when you do so much work getting into a property, because it is very labor intensive, all of the research, all of the work, all of the due diligence that you have to do, you need someone to be like, hey, we've done all this due diligence and now we need to walk away because it's not a good deal for us. And you need someone with the patience and also the looking out for fiduciary responsibility that they take very seriously to take care of you. So as long as you can do that and you have a long-term plan, you can have very successful relationship with real estate brokers. But if you're only going to use them to do a $500 deal, I think you're going to have a tough time doing a broker who knows what they're doing, because they're going to be like, I can make way more money somewhere else.
Absolutely. And I think people don't realize this, that selling a $50,000 house is just as much paperwork and work as selling a $500,000 house.
Well, I'm going to say this. I'm going to stop for 1 second. So when Pete and I where I first started working with Pete, and I learned an incredible amount about real estate. I did 200 deals my first year. So wow. We're talking about buying and selling, me organizing that transaction, the purchase, the sale, the title. I mean, I had to take possession of a minor because the grandmother couldn't get bonded. And do you remember this, Pete? It was like a 13-year-old that was deeded a house. In the state of Georgia, it's illegal for someone under the age of 18 to use the house. So we had to get basically a guardian for him because a grandmother couldn't get probated because her credit was too bad. She couldn't get bonded. So I'm sorry, bonded, not probated. So you learn a lot about you just learn so much about real estate. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry to get a little off track there with that story. But we did a ton of volume with Pete, and I just really learned so much about real estate. Just all the ups and downs that we can go through. And I'm sorry, I completely lost my train of thought.
Well, no, you were talking about as much effort to take a $50,000 transaction as it is, going into trying to close that is a big one.
Okay, so yes, thank you for putting me back on track. So I would say we learned so much effort was for me to go in and do all of this work, because I saw everything. And when I went and I started selling $3 million houses, I literally walked in and walked out with $100,000 commission. I had attorneys. I was a cash deal. There was no financing. The inspector. It is much easier to sell a $3 million property than it is to sell a $50,000 property with financing. If you can find an agent who can close a $50,000 transaction with financing, my God, keep that agent. And I hate to say this, and I don't want to be disrespectful, but literally any person off the street can sell a $3 million house. It takes no talent, none. So the more
all of those deals, if I was licensed, I'd be like, I only do $3 million properties.
Yes. And I think honestly, at that point, your biggest hurdle is not the deal. It's not the meat of the deal. It's convincing the people that you can do it, really. Mm-hmm. But I would say that you're right. Going into a $50,000 deal takes just it's way more labor intensive than a $3 million deal. It's so easy for a $3 million deal. Everything walks itself. But I will definitely say that if you can succeed in investing, starting at the ground floor, which is kind of where a lot of the people that are listening to this is. You can learn it. The buy, the sell, the transaction, the construction, the overages, the time. If you can estimate that all and all put it into one big, just in your brain, so every deal becomes easier and easier as you go, that is absolutely priceless. And then at that point, you can enter the real estate market as your profession because you know more than anyone ever could. Even if you're talking about an agent who just sells retail and has been in the market for 20 years, you can clean the floor with them because you understand real estate. You understand the pitfalls. You'll never understand anything if you don't have adversity.
Hey, talk a little bit, we keep on talking about from the buyer's perspective, seller's perspective, investor's perspective. Talk a little bit about from the realtor's perspective. So let's say I'm an investor. I pull into St. Louis. And, they've been listening to us. They've been listening to so many people talk, and they're like, they need a real estate agent. How do you, as a realtor, evaluate your clients like an investor? If I call you out of the blue, I'm sure you have people calling that you're just like dinging right away and like, I'm not going to invest. So how do you look at a potential client from your perspective, and what do we as investors need to have to kind of take somebody's time, somebody of your level?
You have to have a plan, and it has to be a multi-property plan, and you have to understand. It's very difficult and a lot of labor intensive for me to take someone who's never heard of real estate, educate them fully about the process, and execute everything. I would venture to say that's probably not worth the $2,500 that I may or may not make with that person. I would say that you kind of have to have a plan. You have to have some kind of knowledge, some kind of area that you want to be in, and have an end goal. I want to flip. I want to buy and hold. I want to lease. What are you trying to do? I want to do commercial. I want to do residential. I want to do lease. I want to build. What is it that you're trying to do? That has to be established. And then once you do that, then I can take your plan and say, well, I understand that this is your plan. Maybe we could try something else. Maybe we can try, building. What about mixed use? We can do a lot of things like that, but I have to have something to start with. I really, truly have to have some kind of plan if I'm going to invest time in that. Now, I could just do seminars and things like that, but it's just not what I do, So you got to have some kind of plan on what you're going to do. You have to have some idea of what you can afford, how much money you've got, so that I can narrow down where your target market is. Because maybe if you've got $70,000, I'm going to put you in a different place. If you've got $400,000, I'm going to put you in a different area and how you diversify your portfolio a little bit. So at least I have to have something. It's really difficult for me to take someone who knows nothing and then move forward with them. I'm really not that.
So talk about this, kind of a little bit of personal question as it relates to me specifically. One thing I've been telling investors is I have not bought and this is like legit. Tell me if I'm wrong, but I don't think I bought a property. We bought a property here off MLS in a long time. Is that correct? Maybe one in
Dawsonville, maybe a year ago with Rob.
Okay, so maybe like literally at our volume here, which is dozens and dozens of deals a month, one property that we could pinpoint that made financial sense to us off an MLS.
Right.
Is it possible? Are investors still buying stuff off? And I understand I need deeper discounts probably than most people and all that kind of stuff. But is there still a game left for investors on MLS?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely there is. And I would say this. I think that, so keep in mind that most of my business now is kind of with the end user, right? So I'm talking about the end investor who's going to hold, and I'm also talking about the investor that's going to lease it out. So I'm kind of on the retail end. And I would venture to say that if your property is not on the MLS, how do I know that I'm getting the true value off it? Because I may put it on the market for, let's say, put on the market for just like $200,000, but I really could have gotten $215,000 if I put it in an open bidding process, or I'm opening it up to more people. So I do think, in a way, from my perspective, an end user, I do want to put it in the MLS because I can get more people. And if I was going to have it as a pocket listing, I'd be working those people anyway. Right. But I want, if I'm representing the seller, I'm going to want to get as much activity on the property and exposure of the property that I possibly can get. So I think on the end user, but as obtaining the properties, sometimes I think the best thing to do for someone who maybe doesn't have access to all the lists and the taxes and all the, the auctions going on, is that if you have a house in one area that you want to be in, sometimes just doing the grassroots things of sticking a letter in the box that says, hey, I'm an investor and I want to be in this area. Can you help me out? If you have someone who wants to sell, call me. I'd love to talk to them. And a lot of that grassroots stuff really, really works, because I think people they want to know they want to know they. And then so specific.
And I think that's, I talk about this all the time because I kind of feel like that's what's missing in the world. People find it so odd that, I cold call them or I knock on their door or put a letter on their door. I mean, they're just blown away, and a lot of people find that antiquated, but at the same time, I feel like, buyers and sellers, they're really craving those interpersonal relationships. And when you can provide that, you're really setting yourself apart from everybody else. And I want to bring up something that you said. Whenever Cheryl was talking about bidding wars and things like that, and when it comes to hiring a real estate agent or a realtor, it's important that you hire someone that knows what they're doing, okay? If I hired somebody brand new off the street and they listed my home at $200,000, and let's say they took the first offer that came in, in my mind, I'd be happy I got my $200,000. Somebody like Cheryl's going to push that sales up to $215,000 to $220,000 because she understands bidding wars. She understands putting buyers against each other and things like that. So, everybody wants to look at what commission you put in your pocket, and they don't know. And what they need to be concerned is choosing someone like yourself to the level in which you're doing this, because you're going to make them above and beyond what they're ever going to pay you.
No, I completely agree. And, the thing is I have sellers down to such a system that I can do it in my city. I understand. Yeah. I understand the neighborhood. I understand the beat of the property. So every property is kind of like a heartbeat when you put it on the market, and you're always on it. Like, what's going on? How many showings am I getting? What's the consistency? I can even monitor how long each of those showings are there. So I'm really on tune with that. And then when I get an offer, I can advise it, correctly. I can say, hey, you got to take this offer because this is what I'm seeing in the this is a good. We're going to say, okay. Let's see what we can do. And maybe you submit an offer to me and I don't respond to you because I know I've got other ones coming in, but I'm vetting all of that stuff. So it really depends on but I know I'm kind of over talking. I really want to hammer home one point that's really important to me, where I see a lot of investors making enormous mistakes on the resale value. So if you go in, let's say you're in the $3,000 to $4,000 range, which is kind of like the mid-range luxury in some of the towns in St. Louis. The average sales price here is about $235,000, all averaged out. Some, $3 million, some $50,000, but that's pretty much where the average is. And seeing these homes in the $3,000 to $4,000 to $100,000 range, people are flipping these homes, and one thing that they're not doing is they're not thinking about when they're putting it on the MLS and when we're going to sell it. This seller is going to have an extensive list of inspections. So I think you're having a lot of people come in and they have a certain amount. They can do floors, they can do some mild plumbing, they can do a little bit of electrical, they can paint, they can rip down walls. But one thing that they're not doing is they're not doing their due diligence on their big dollar items. So I've had 2 houses in the last month done by rehabbers that I sold off market. They weren't even listed. And I brought my buyer in there, and we had an extensive list, and their list of things that they missed because it wasn't on their due diligence and it wasn't in their budget for overages is about $10,000 worth of stuff. So foundation, sewer laterally. So, from the house to the street, what does that sewer look like? And plumbing. Those are your big dollar items that really, truly make a huge difference. So I would advise people, when you're going into, and the end user is a retail buyer, you have to do an inspection. They're expensive. They could cost you an additional $1,000. To that point, I would say, which if they knew about it, they could have negotiated the price differently. But I would say that if you're going to do this, $1,000 is going to make or break you one way on a deal, but you should walk away from that deal anyway. But please, if your end is a retail user, make sure you're getting your big dollar inspections done prior to purchasing that home.
All right, listen, Cheryl, we're being shown the sign. We're a little bit past our time, but listen, we totally appreciate you being here. Why don't you tell everybody how, if they are in the St. Louis area or any other place you're looking for potential clients, whether retail or investor, what is the best way to get a hold of you? Any social media you want to give out? Any contact information?
Best way to get a hold of me is my cell. I like quick and direct. You can text me 314-565-5720. You can email me, just Cheryl@johnsonrealty.com. That's CHERYL. And then you can contact me on Facebook. It's just Johnson Realty is my page, and then also on Instagram as well. But honestly, just pick up the phone, call me or text me. It's the quickest way and the most efficient way.
Yeah, guys, I will tell you, from 14 years ago all the way now, we've stayed in touch, and Cheryl truly is. One thing I've been telling David here, I said, quit using the word killer. I think we're overusing it. Cheryl's a killer. I mean, she really is. She's absolutely awesome. So, guys, the Wholesale Hustler podcast show is brought to you by the Partner-Driven Real Estate Investing Program. And in the program, it's very simple. If you want to learn how to find incredible real estate deals, use all my money to close on the deals, use our infrastructure to help you fix it, then we sell it together and split the profits. That's what our Partner-Driven Coaching Program is all about. To get more information about it, simply go to that's my name, petervekselman.com, or you can call me like Cheryl. We give out our numbers at 404-948-4340. Guys, this Wholesale Hustler podcast is also available on Spreaker. It's available on iTunes, Google Play, and actually we've been picked up on every Friday now, 9 a.m. Eastern on 3 and Out Radio.
That's awesome. So, guys, we want you to stay tuned for another episode of the Wholesale Hustler podcast. You're going to tune in every Wednesday at 2 p.m., and we're going to have great content and great people just like Miss Cheryl here. And we were so glad to have you on.
Thank you so much.
See you, Cheryl. Bye.